Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Sitting on Nefarian's head, Sumu seemed to feel countless tiny forces coming from all directions, merging into his body and becoming one with him. These powers are fear. In the City of Salvation, in the entire Anduin continent, the fear that countless creatures have for him. It was because of the appearance of these countless fears that they gathered together to form the power of fear, activating his original fear halo, and giving him the opportunity to enter the sanctuary. Next, all he needs to do is to collect free points. Use the free points to evolve the fear halo into the power of fear that truly belongs to him, and use this to step into the sanctuary. Inside the City of Salvation, those three commanders, as well as many professionals and heroes, did not know that the purpose of the Undead Master has been achieved, and the endless undead natural disaster has ended. But the undead natural disaster that Sumu summoned before is enough to continue to move forward in the next half day. Continue to approach the City of Salvation, and continue to cover the city they don't even know. After fear, the next step is to harvest. The disaster is over. The black mist that covered hundreds of thousands of kilometers also gradually dissipated. Instead, it's the magic energy that Sumu exudes. Waited for a while, when the following undead continued to move forward and rushed to the front of the City of Salvation. Sumu wrapped Nefarian with the billowing demonic energy emanating from him, and also wrapped Angus and Carol on the ground. Ra, Mist and their subordinates step out. Phase transfer starts. In an instant, Sumu took his subordinates, the Death Knights, the Ghost Army and the 40 skeleton swordsmen, over a distance of more than 100 kilometers and 610 kilometers, and also passed through the defensive knot of the City of Salvation. The world appeared inside the City of Salvation. The Undead Master is coming. Just when the three commanders and many professionals and heroes in the city were frightened by the increasing number of undead, their real enemy, the Undead Master, appeared like this. Can be elected as Supreme Commander? The three legendary heroes who have reached their peak are naturally not easy to match. Almost in a daze, the three commanders calmed down and issued orders according to the tactics they had deduced countless times before. None. The center of 6 major combat platforms. Each center has a team of legendary heroes. These legendary heroes, defensive legendary heroes and physical, attacking legendary heroes are outside, and the legendary spellcaster is protected in the center. Every legendary spellcaster who is heavily protected holds a holy artifact in his hand, whirling. Dozens of countries, more than a dozen races? It is still very easy to make up more than 10 pieces of holy artifact. In addition to the sacred artifact in the hands of these 6 legendary spellcasters, in all directions of the City of Salvation, there are other races of creatures, holding the sacred artifact of their own race, waiting for battle taping. Commander's order. In the center of one of the combat platforms, a legendary mage had not yet found Sumu's figure, so he instinctively controlled the holy weapon in his hand, released its power, and attacked the direction and coordinates marked in the order. Can take time. A pale light shot up into the sky, shrouding Sumu, who had just appeared in the barrier almost the same time. The rays of light representing the other 4 holy relics also rose into the sky, following the rays of the first holy relic, attacking the direction where Sumu appeared. The 6th holy artifact emits a burst of emerald green light, covering most of the City of Salvation. 6 holy artifacts, 6 rays, inspired by a legendary pinnacle spellcaster, and with the increase of each rune array, they brought the power of these 6 sacred artifacts to the limit. Seeing that the figure of the Undead Master, who just appeared, was drowned by the pale light, the 3 commanders breathed a sigh of relief. 6 holy artifacts. The first is the binding artifacts. Its only effect is to bind the enemy. The single effect also means that there is almost no existence that can break free from the shackles of this sacred artifact. Even if he is as powerful as the Undead Master, at least he will be bound by this holy artifact for a while, right? The 4 holy weapons that erupted next were all attacking holy weapons. The combined bombardment of the 4 holy artifacts. I am afraid that even the terrifying existence above the legend is unbearable. The 6th holy artifact is an auxiliary holy artifact. When the emerald green light spreads out, all the professionals and heroes within the shrouded range of the holy artifact have greatly increased their combat power, and at the same time are free from the erosion of the breath of death and darkness. Bind first, then attack. Knowing all the information about the Undead Master, the 3 commanders naturally knew that the Undead Master has a kind of elusive displacement skill that is enough to cross the defensive barrier. As long as they can bind the Undead Master to the result of the battle, they will win half on the podium. Seeing that the figure of the Undead Master, who just appeared, was drowned by the pale light, the 3 commanders were slightly overjoyed. Of course, before the Undead Master appeared, they lost again and again. It was just the undead natural disaster that forced them to enter the fourth stage of the war. Now it seems like they've got the upper hand. One binding holy artifact imprisoned the undead master, and 4 attacking holy artifacts bombarded the undead master at the next moment. Even if it cannot be killed at one time, at least it can be severely damaged. They see hope of winning only just after releasing the phase shift and taking the high-level undead under his command across the defensive barrier. Sumu saw the pale white light that struck. Too late to escape. The pale white light suddenly turned into strands of filaments, covering Sumu's whole body, as if it imprisoned his body and all the energy in his body. Only next moment, body of the king, skill activated. Before these filaments can truly imprison Sumu, they fail under the action of this boss skill, freeing Sumu from the imprisonment again. 4 attacks come. Sumu smiled slightly. Ignoring the 4 attacks that even the sanctuary did not dare to despise, he stepped out again. From the sky to the ground, while many professionals and heroes in the City of Salvation are still waiting for the result of this concentrated fire and bombardment, Sumu has placed Agnes, Carola and Mist on the ground of the City of Salvation, and he himself. It was the 3rd time to start the phase shift, and it appeared in the center of the City of Salvation, near the tallest mage tower. With Sumu's current knowledge, it is enough to understand the operation of the entire defensive enchantment. He could see at a glance that the tallest mage tower, in the center of the City of Salvation, was the center of the entire defensive barrier, destroying the energy center of the mage tower. Even if this defensive barrier is indestructible, it can only collapse from the inside. For a moment, 3 phase shifts. The high-level undead appeared smoothly inside the city, and Sumu also appeared near the mage tower on the podium. The eyes of the 3 commanders were split. The binding sacred artifact failed, and they didn't notice it, but the next bombardment of the 4 holy artifacts passed through the position where the undead master appeared before without any hindrance, and blasted towards the defensive barrier in the high sky. How could they not notice? They got it wrong. The asymmetry of information made them unaware that Sumu already possessed the passive skill, Body of the King, which forced him to save all control skills, which also led to the fact that from the very beginning, the only flaw in Sumu that they knew was that incorrect binding skills are invalid. The power of the undead ruler is unparalleled, coupled with the elusive displacement skill seem. This is an unresolved opponent. From surprise to despair, there was such a big emotional contrast in an instant, and the 3 commanders almost collapsed. But they are extraordinary after all. After realizing this, they immediately made what they thought was the most correct decision. Go for it. The war has entered its 5th stage. Fight for life. Yes, according to the original plan of the 3 commanders, the first round of the Binding Hallows and the other 4 Hallows should severely damage the undead master. Next, all they need is to fight for their lives. With those rune arrays, legendary heroes, and holy artifacts, even if you sacrifice your own life, you must kill the undead master here. The 5th stage of the war is actually the last stage. If they win, the world will win. When they lose, the world loses. There is no other possibility now. The first round of blows failed, and the only thing they could do was to enter the 5th stage ahead of schedule and use the lives of countless powerhouses to consume the strength of the undead master. Of course, it's just their idea. It is a tactic they specify based on their understanding of the strength of the undead master. Do not. Mage Tower. The figure of Sumu appeared near the Mage Tower, and a legendary hero cried out in despair. Destroy the Mage Tower. The defensive barrier will be broken. If the defensive barrier is broken, the countless undead will pour into the city. It seemed like the cruelest scene he could think of. However, when he saw Sumu's figure near the mage's tower, the commander calmed down. Not because the mage tower is unimportant, but because they didn't hit the undead master in the first round of concentrated fire bombardment, they were already in the worst situation. Even if the defensive barrier shatters, and the ocean of undead pours in, the situation they face will not get any worse. That being the case, why not focus on dealing with the undead masters, ignoring the vast ocean of undead, which is actually far less threatening than the undead masters? Calm down. Even in a desperate situation, the 3 commanders quickly calmed down, and continued to issue combat orders one by one. In the east of the City of Salvation, an elf archer, who has reached the pinnacle of legend appeared. Her emerald green eyes stared at the figure that quietly emerged from the vicinity of the Mage Tower, and poured all her magic power into the emerald green eldest son in her hand, aimed at that figure. In the south of the City of Salvation, an assassin from the pinnacle of legend held a long and narrow black sword. His figure disappeared quietly, disappeared into the shadows, and approached Sumu at an almost flickering speed. The west of the City of Salvation, north of the City of Salvation, one of the most powerful legendary heroes, each piece of sacred artifact with extraordinary power, locked that figure at this moment, and at this moment, released his strongest blow. Mage Tower can be destroyed, defensive wards can collapse, the Sea of the Dead can enter the city, they can also sacrifice, but the Undead Master must die. Outside the Mage Tower, the third phase shift appeared near the energy center of this defensive barrier, and the skeleton sword in Suma's hand swung out like lightning. Next moment, 10 huge pitch-black sword lights rushed out and cut towards the Mage Tower. As long as the Mage Tower is cut off, and the energy is lost, the defensive barrier will not be ashamed. At the same time that Sumu cut out this knife, in the Mage Tower, the legendary mage in charge of the Mage Tower had already received messages from the 3 commanders. The sword is approaching. The Mage Tower is not guaranteed. At this moment, a vicious expression appeared on the face of this legendary mage. He pressed his hands on the control center of the Mage Tower, and the surging magic value in his body poured into the control center crazily. Next moment, knife cut off. The legendary mage was cut off with the entire Mage Tower. His goal has been reached. When the dark sword light flashed by and the tall Mage Tower began to collapse, the magic furnace filled with countless magic crystals exploded. A Mage Tower. Moreover, it is also the Mage Tower, as the energy center of the entire defense enchantment. It is conceivable how many magic crystals are accumulated in its magic furnace. When the legendary mage detonated the magic furnace with the control center, the countless magic crystals suddenly became the accelerant of this explosion, and became the catalyst of this explosion. Like the sun falling, first, a blazing light burst out, illuminating the entire city of Salvation like a kingdom of heaven. Immediately afterwards, a violent shock wave spread with blazing flames, sweeping, tearing, and melting everything around the Mage Tower. Finally, it is the roar that resounds throughout the city of Salvation. The magic furnace of a Mage Tower exploded with a huge number of magic crystals. This power is almost beyond the forbidden spell. The wreckage of the Mage Tower disappeared instantly. Everything in the vicinity of the Mage Tower, for nearly 1,000 meters, was also torn apart in the shock wave and blazing high temperature that spread even thousands of miles away. When the shock wave mixed with flame spreads, the lethality to everything around it is no less than the skill attack of a hero professional. Take time, lives die, buildings collapse. Those high-level undead, who were brought to the City of Salvation by Sumu, had not had time to cause harm, but the self-destruction of this Mage Tower destroyed countless buildings and destroyed countless lives. No one blamed the mage. The 3 commanders have issued combat orders. From the moment the Undead Master appeared, this war has entered the 5th stage. Fighting for their lives. 5th stage. Not only does it mean that the strength of the Undead Master must be consumed with the lives of those many strong men, but it also means that any means are allowed as long as it can cause damage to the Undead Master, regardless of costs. Burn one's boats. This is the essence of the 5th stage of fighting for life. The Mage Tower exploded. Great damage was done to the City of Salvation, but no one cares about this. Those professionals, those heroes, they all looked nervously at the rising mushroom cloud. Can this kind of self-destruction of the Mage Tower, which is almost beyond the forbidden spell, injure or even severely damage the Undead Master? Even in the 4 directions, the 4 peak legends holding the holy artifact, their attacks at this moment also showed a momentary delay. Perhaps the self-destruction of the Mage Tower can really hit the Undead Master. Maybe. Slowly, the smoke cleared. Slowly, the light disappeared. A figure that was not tall emerged from the ruins. Black basket, black armor, a black skeleton sword, accompanied by the scattered smoke and the gradually extinguished fire. The figure who came out is the Lord of the Undead. It's just that the Lord of the Undead at this time can't see any trace of being seriously injured. Perhaps the only trace that can prove that he was affected by the self-destruction of the Mage Tower is the charred traces that appeared slightly on the black heavy armor. Invalid. Invalid. How can it be invalid? A legendary hero. That was the self-destruction of the Mage Tower. It was a terrorist attack that almost surpassed the forbidden spell, and was enough to level a city. Why did he not get hurt at all after the self-destruction of the Mage Tower's Undead Master? He did not know. As early as when he entered the plane of death, Suma's physical strength had reached a level close to that of a holy artifact. When you create your own half-plane, develop it into a small plane, and then raise the level to the upper limit of level 80. At this time, Suma's physical strength has already reached the level of a real holy artifact. Even among the holy artifact, there are very few that can match Suma's current physical strength. Forbidden bombardment, holy artifact bombardment. For the former Sumu, it was indeed a great threat, but for today's Sumu, even his defenses are hard to break. So, he will let the construction of the City of Salvation be allowed, so only then will he gather all the powerhouses on the entire continent and catch them all in one go. Just because he already has absolute strength, with what the powerhouses of the Alliance of the Living have planned, he can smash them to pieces with absolute strength. A legendary hero. that many professionals and heroes are also in love on the podium. The legendary warrior was almost speechless. The self-destruction of the Mage Tower can't hurt him, because of the particularity of the City of Salvation, because of the special nature of the self-destruction of the Mage Tower. The range of this self-destruction may not be comparable to the real forbidden spell, but the Mage Tower adjacent to the self-explosion has suffered the undead master of the self-explosive power, and the damage it has suffered has definitely exceeded the normal forbidden spell bombardment. Forbidden spell and holy artifact. This is the strength of their fight against the undead master, when even an attack at the level of the forbidden spell could hardly hurt the undead master. It seemed that all their efforts and all their resistance were in vain. This is the deepest despair. They are not afraid of casualties, not afraid of sacrifice, even at the cost of the sacrifice of all the professionals and heroes in the City of Salvation. They are willing to drag the undead master to death, but they are afraid. They are afraid that everything they do is useless, and it is difficult to change the fact that the world is about to sink. Do not, we haven't lost yet. We have one last chance. While speaking, the legendary mage looked at the auxiliary holy weapon in his hand. Without needing more words, the other two commanders understood what he meant really. They also have an attack method that surpasses forbidden spells and holy artifacts. That is, self-destructing holy weapon. Every piece of holy artifact contains extremely huge energy. If you use detonating the holy artifact as an attack method, when approaching the undead master, you can definitely break through the terrifying defense of the undead master, inflict heavy damage or even kill it. The fire of hope begins to burn. After understanding the meaning of the legendary mage, the legendary knight took the auxiliary holy weapon into his hands, and said with a smile, "I'll come." Next moment, the three legendary heroes as supreme commanders rose into the air and rushed toward Suma's direction at the fastest speed. On the way, their last battle order spread in the City of Salvation. A disorderly suicide attack by all. Create attack conditions for special teams. Attack method, self-destructing holy weapon. My heart trembled. The elf archer holding the emerald green longbow paused slightly. The special team is the legendary hero, who holds the holy artifact. Self-destructing holy artifact. Every piece of sacred artifact is a national treasure of a country, and it is also a sacred artifact of a race. Its preciousness cannot be measured by value. However, the elf archer did not refuse. Like many other legendary heroes with holy weapons, she clearly understands that if the undead master cannot be killed, the world will have no future. Even if the sacred artifact is preserved, their treasure of the country and the sacred artifact of inheritance will become the spoils of the undead master. Holy artifact exploded. The holy artifact explodes. When the last operational order was communicated, the commander's trio had already rushed to the vicinity of Sumu. 3 legends, even the pinnacle legend. In the eyes of Sumu at this time, the fragile is no different from Lu Yi, but, under the support of belief, the legendary wizard and legendary warrior rushed to Suma's front and broke out their most powerful skills to hold down the undead master. And the legendary knight with the strongest defense appeared behind Sumu with a charge, detonating the holy weapon in his hand. Boom! In the roar of the sky, a violent torrent of energy erupted under the last guidance of the legendary knight. This torrent of energy seemed to have transformed into a giant dragon and devoured it towards Sumu. The holy artifact exploded. Sumu frowned. He didn't expect that these legendary heroes actually found a way to threaten him, and they were really willing to carry out this kind of attack. Of course, just threatening enough. If you want to really hurt him, you must at least keep up with his speed. Let him face the power of those sacred artifact explosions. Waving to kill the 2 legendary heroes, Sumu stepped out and appeared on the other side of the City of Salvation. The torrent of energy that carried the legendary knight's last hope also passed by, bombarding the ground of the City of Salvation and shattering the ground constructed of large tracts of mountain foundations. Sumu dodged the bombardment. Instead of making the legendary heroes feel hopeless, it gave them renewed hope. They are not afraid of sacrifice. I'm afraid that if I try my best, I won't be able to hurt the undead master. Since the undead master has avoided the self-destruction of the undead this time, it means that the last combat order of the 3 commanders is correct. The self-destruction of the undead is the only way to destroy the undead master. Take time. Professionals and heroes in Salvation City went crazy, countless and disorderly. They soared into the sky and attacked in the direction of Sumu, completely ignoring other high-level undead, and even ignoring the shattering of the defensive barrier, which flooded into the City of Salvation like a tide. Dead Sea. I just want to hold back the undead master with my own life. Create opportunities for those who possess the sacred artifact. Boom. Remember to break the empty chop and hit it. A large area of dark red light blades quickly spread out, beheading the middle and low-level professionals in the large area. Sumu frowned slightly. This will not work. Not to mention that he needs the free points, represented by these legendary heroes and epic heroes. Those holy artifacts alone are all his trophies. Although Argus and Willis have the ability to forge holy artifacts, those who create holy artifacts are not. Materials are not so easy to find, so active attack, not waiting for those professionals and heroes to rush, and not waiting for those legendary heroes with holy weapons to attack. Suma's figure kept flashing all over the City of Salvation, phase shift again and again, spanning space again and again, hunt for the Hallows while hunting legendary and epic heroes. The battle for the City of Salvation has never stopped since it started high in the air. Nefarian is fighting. Its opponent is not a legendary hero, but a few legendary dragons from Dragon Island on Earth. Agnes and Carola were fighting. They commanded their subordinates and charged in the city again and again, killing enemies one by one and turning them into undead. Mr. is fighting. This corpse swordsman brought a gust of wind, with the skeleton swordsman under his command, tearing any existence that dared to approach them to shreds. The Sea of the Dead is also fighting. The hatred for the living and the obsession with flesh and blood make these dead people, crawling out of hell to fight frantically, devouring all living beings within their perception range, from the sky, to the combat platform, back to the city. The battle has been going on. Perhaps, in the entire City of Salvation, the only peaceful place is the underground. Here, under the City of Salvation, when the City of Salvation was being built, the Alliance of the Living was a hiding place specially prepared for those living, who were weak in combat but had great value. For example, that one craftsman. For example, the blacksmith and alchemist. Another example is those so-called big men, who are high in power but not very strong, and it is difficult to play a role in the decisive battle of June the 13th ground. In other words, the lower area of the City of Salvation also has a water curtain at this time. This water curtain is projecting the battle in the City of Salvation, allowing these living beings who are isolated from the battlefield to know the battle situation at the upper level as soon as possible. The emergence of the undead master, the collapse of the defensive barrier, the influx of the Sea of the Dead, suicide attack by 3 commanders, and what followed. Those countless professionals and heroes who risked their lives would rather sacrifice themselves but also hold back the undead masters, decisive and decisive, to create opportunities for the special team. All of this deeply infected the living beings who were still in shelter. Lower area center. King Oz looked at the picture on the water curtain, and his heart was dead silent. From the perspective of the entire Anduin continent, this king may be the only ruler who is qualified to be on a par with Caesar VII. If it is said that Caesar VII is a bright prince, a man of great talent, and an extraordinary charm, King Os is a typical Kwangsong. If there is no Caesar VII, if there is no such sudden disaster, he can really slowly develop the kingdom of Os into an existence no less than Caesar's empire, and become the second continental overlord. But reality is reality. No if. Watching the self-destruction of each piece of sacred artifact in the water curtain, watching the fallen heroes of the heroes in the water curtain seem to fall into the twilight, exuding an aura of dead silence. He has done everything he can. How is the result? It's not up to him to decide. Even the king of the table, King Oz, is like this. Not to mention others. At this time, in this vast lower area, in this shelter that accommodates millions of craftsmen, blacksmiths, alchemists and so-called big men, everyone exudes a breath of despair. Perhaps Augustine the only exception. Yes, Augustine is also in the lower area. As the new emperor of Caesar's empire, Augustine's strength has always been shown only as a hero. After putting everything that Caesar's empire could come up with into this battle for salvation at the insistence of the black and thin old man, Augustine still appeared in this sanctuary at this time. Augustine has stood up, watching the battles projected in the water curtain, watching the professionals and heroes who were ruthlessly torn apart, watching the black and thin old man, whom he respected, being beheaded, watching the old who has always been his shadow, was engulfed. A cold smile quietly emerged from Augustine's face. Augustine, what are you up to? Augustine was in a position not far from King Oz. When Augustine stood up from his seat, a disturbing cold smile appeared on his face. King Oz trembled inexplicably and couldn't help asking. King Oz's question was not answered. Standing in this sanctuary, Augustine stared at the water curtain, a little straight. Only by blending into the darkness can we fight against the darkness. All along, I have not understood the true meaning of this sentence. Yes, since you have stepped into the darkness. Why do you still have fantasies about the light? To completely step into the darkness, embrace the darkness, and merge into the darkness is my only destination. A sentence of self-talk. The content revealed in it is horrifying. When he heard the content of this sentence clearly, King Os's expression changed greatly. In vain. Only, before he does anything, the strength of Augustine, which was covered up, bloomed at this moment. Epic stage, legendary tier, the next legend, median legend, top legend, peak legend, almost in the blink of an eye. Augustine, who was originally just a heroic rank, exuded aura that crossed the epic rank and the legendary rank, reaching the level of a peak legend. Even in the perception of the kingdom of Oz, the aura emanating from Augustine at this time is still above the peak legend. Desolate Knight. As one of the ultimate occupations, Augustine at this time should be the most powerful creature in the entire City of Salvation. Legend of the Pinnacle. King Os was almost like talking, and spit out these 4 words. It was hard for him to imagine how Augustine concealed his strength. It is even more difficult for him to imagine how his opponent, in just 2 or 3 years, has grown from a heroic knight to a terrifying existence that is almost above the legend. An ominous gray light rose up, enveloping Augustine in it. When this gray light rose, what King Os saw did not seem to be a knight above the legend. Instead, it was a dead silence, a barren land, without any vitality. This is. King Os seemed to understand something. With this kind of power, it is no wonder that Augustine has grown to such a degree in such a short period of time. Possess this power. No wonder Augustine said in his mouth that only by blending into the darkness can we fight against the darkness. Because in his feeling, Augustine's power may be different from that of the undead master, but in essence, it's all dark. With a chuckle without the slightest emotion, Augustine did not give King Os a chance to continue speaking because a gray halo has quietly unfolded under his feet. Aura of desolation. Devour all life and make the earth desolate. When this barren halo unfolded, endless vitality began to converge towards Augustine's body, and the source of these vitality is the millions of craftsmen, blacksmiths, alchemists, and the so-called big men in the refuge. Augustine has been wrong by 0 since the beginning. Salvation, from the very beginning. The way to save Anduin was in his hands. If he is a sanctuary, if he has the power over the undead master, if his strength grows enough to destroy the world, he can naturally save the world. Even after 2 awakenings, Augustine still had the last ray of light in his heart. He devours living beings and devours enemies. However, it has never transferred the target of life force absorption from the beasts and enemies to the countless creatures and countless human beings. If it was at the very beginning of the establishment of the City of Salvation, he would devour the entire City of Salvation. I'm afraid the undead master has no chance to wreak havoc at all, right? Perhaps. The aura of desolation is spreading, with the wisps of vitality quickly entering his body. The life in this sanctuary is withering. They are terrified, they are desperate, but they didn't even have time to escape. They were swallowed up by the halo of desolation, from a living creature to a dry corpse. Move forward step by step. Countless vitality converges. The aura emanating from Augustine's body is also getting bigger and bigger. Seem about to break through the upper limit of the legendary rank. Again it seems, suppressed by a layer of unknown existence. It has been difficult to break through. From the center of the sanctuary to the entrance of the sanctuary, Augustine was walking towards the upper floors of the City of Salvation. After all, the life in the sanctuary is too small and the rank is too low to help him break through that layer of restriction. Only in the battlefield where countless professionals and heroes are fighting, their vitality can help Augustine complete this sublimation. Slowly, the figure of Augustine disappeared in the passage leading to the City of Salvation from the sanctuary, and there was only a dead silence in this not-so-small sanctuary. In this short period of time, all the vitality of life is swallowed up by the aura of desolation. No longer alive, only barren. The only ones left here are the corpses of withered wives all over the ground. In the City of Salvation, the battle continues, but it's nearing the end. As Sumu said, the self-destruction of the Holy Artifact 5.5 was enough to break through his body defense, enough to hurt him. But that requires those legendary heroes who self-destructed the sacred artifact to be able to catch up with him. Just half an hour, a legendary hero and an epic hero fell into the hands of Sumu, which brought him a lot of free points, and at the same time he finally gained 2 holy weapons, a shield, a long gun, and the legendary hero and the only remaining sacred artifact in the City of Salvation. There are only 2 pieces left. One is a long and narrow black knife held by a legendary assassin, the other is an emerald green long bow, held by an elf archer left over. They've all exploded. And what about their results? In addition to making more black marks on Suma's skeleton armor, the biggest result of the battle was to tear a small gap in the armor on his back. 1 chase, 2 escape. At a time when dozens of epic heroes rose to the sky or jumped down, trying to create an attack time for the only 2 remaining legendary heroes, at the cost of their own lives. A footstep sounded quietly on the battlefield. Gray brilliance lingers. The gray halo unfolds. Augustine, the Knight of Desolation, has stepped into the battlefield. When he felt another kind of deep darkness coming, Sumu couldn't help but stopped his pursuit and looked towards the direction from which the darkness came. He saw Augustine. I felt the deadly power that devoured all life even more. Interesting. I originally thought that this was just a crushing without fun, but I didn't expect such an unexpected change at the last moment of this battle, and this seems to be an acquaintance. Get out of the shelter and officially step into the battlefield. The gray aura of desolation beneath Augustine's feet was also rapidly expanding. In the shelter, there are only 1 million weak lives, but in this battlefield, even after repeated battles, there are still millions of professionals and heroes. They are still fighting hard. They did not see that the footsteps of the undead master had stopped. They did not see the appearance of Augustine. They did not see a gray halo that was rapidly expanding on the battlefield. Next moment, endless vitality gathered again and poured into Augustine's body. The professionals and heroes who were in the battle were drained of all their vitality without any resistance. Before the attacks of the many undead fell, they turned into corpses with dry marks and wisps. No one but the two legendary heroes, holding the rising, can resist the life drain of the desolation halo. Fighting, this brought together the powerhouses of the entire Anduin continent. They did not die in the ocean of undead, nor in the hands of high-level undead, nor in the hands of Sumu, but in the hands of Augustine. 1 million, 2 millions, or 5 million, when the 0-1 professionals, heroes, and lives were taken out of life and turned into mummified corpses. Augustine, who stepped into the battlefield, finally began to change. Above the sky, legendary assassin and elven archer with eyes wide open. The millions of professionals and heroes who died in an instant caused a huge panic in their hearts. They don't even know how this is done. Above the earth, Agnes, Carola, and Mist, who were ordered by Sumu, retreated with their subordinates, away from the battlefield where Augustine was. According to Augustine, at the cost of complete sinking and complete integration into the darkness, he swallowed enough vitality to finally break the barrier that was stuck on the legendary rank, and was about to advance to a higher level. This realm is the sanctuary. At the cost of devouring millions of lives, he will finally gain the power of the sanctuary level. Gain enough power to fight the undead master. Desolation spreads. Darkness grows. At this moment, Augustine's eyes were completely occupied by darkness. From this moment on, Augustine, who has completely integrated into the darkness, has no possibility of returning to the light. In Sumu's view, this is not the case. He is a dimension demon, and he has a dimension plane of his own. In his perception, when Augustine devoured the vitality of millions of professionals and heroes, gathered all these vitality into his body, and wanted to make a breakthrough, a brilliance powerful blessing to Augustine's body. Just like the power of the planes, the increase in the combat power brought to Sumu, this brilliant blessing is Augustine in the low-level world of Anduin continent. From the peak of the legendary rank to the key to sanctuary breakthrough, this power is similar to the power of planes, but it is above the power of the plane. If Sumu guessed correctly this power, it should be the world power of Anduin. Sumu is the master of the dimension plane, so he can get the blessing of the power of the plane, and the effect of increasing the combat power. And Augustine, who is blessed by the power of the world and breaks through the sanctuary, should be the patron of this world, child of the world. It is hard to imagine that a barren knight, who has mastered the power of desolation, will bring death and desolation to the whole world, and in the whole world, is actually the son of the world of Anduin continent. This contrast, just like Sumu, or the gluttonous insect king, who also had the power to destroy the world, was favored by this world and became the son of the world of Anduin continent. This is scary. Are you dying fast enough? Of course, it's all a joke. Augustine became the son of the world, and the real reason for being blessed by the power of the world is probably the threat he brought. A son of the world who is breaking through to the sanctuary is also the last means of self-rescue on the Anduin continent. Augustine is breaking through, having swallowed enough vitality, and with the blessing of the power of the world, he broke through from the peak of the legendary rank to the sanctuary level, and there is almost no possibility of failure. Endless vitality gathers. A huge energy vortex appeared in the sky above the city of salvation, pouring out almost endless vitality, instilling Augustine into his body. Together with the power of desolation in his body, strengthen this night and transform this night. Such spectacular. This variation. In the entire city of salvation, in addition to Sumu, only the two legendary heroes of the high-level undead under his command can be seen, because other lives have long been swallowed by Augustine. Of course, the projection array is still running. The creatures on the countless continents can still see everything that follows through the water curtains. Sumu didn't stop. Standing high in the sky, with a faint smile on his face, the undead master watched the entire process of Augustine's breakthrough. Not only did he not interrupt, but even meant to let him break through. And in this process, He is also perceiving the changes in the entire Anduin continent with his heart. Normally, the energy level of Anduin continent is not enough for it to give birth to the existence of the sanctuary level. Once born, there are only two possibilities. The first, the emergence of a true child of the world, not only broke through the upper limit of the legendary rank and entered the sanctuary with his own talent and ability, but also drove the promotion of the entire world, allowing Anduin continent to step from a low-level world to a high-level world. The second, it is now, when the whole world is in danger of extinction, the world's instinctive self-rescue will bless the power of the world to the existence that can save the world the most, help it break through and save the world. But the sanctuary that appears in this way, of course, does not have any hidden dangers, but it has huge hidden dangers for the whole world. Either the rules of the world have loosened, so that from now on, the existence of other worlds, or demigods and evil gods can more easily invade this world, or the energy level of this world will not increase, but will fall further. That is, the level cap is lowered. It is clear. The scene that Sumu saw in front of his eyes was the second situation. When facing the crisis of extinction, the world instinctively consumes its own origin, blesses Augustine with the power of the world, helps him break through, and fights the undead master no matter what the result is. The final fate of Anduin continent will not be all well, but even if the rules are loosened, even if the energy level falls, it is much better to continue to exist than to be shattered and become a dead world. Is not it? It can be said, there is only instinct, no independent consciousness. This choice is the best choice for Anduin continent, also the only option. Time flies. Under the installation of endless vitality, Augustine broke through and became the only sanctuary on the Anduin continent, and became the hope of the entire Anduin continent. At this moment, Sumu clearly felt that the world rules of Anduin continent had loosened a little. A small defect also appeared on the world crystal wall of this world. Perhaps in the future, these small flaws that are difficult to detect are the new ways for demigods and evil gods to invade the Anduin continent and plunder the life and beliefs of this world. Of course, after that, it is something that Sumu should only consider after he has brought the world under his control. Before this, the first thing Sumu faces is the newly born sanctuary, the desolate night. The breath radiated from the body radiated, and Augustine at this time was truly unknown. Just walking, he will instinctively plunder the surrounding vitality, no matter whether this vitality comes from life, or from the earth, from the world itself. If there is no Sumus existence, the existence of Augustine alone will bring the final annihilation to the world after a long 613 years. In this sense, the blessing of the power of the world on Augustine is just drinking poison to quench thirst. Advanced sanctuary. Augustine's strength has grown countless times. At this time, he finally had the strength and confidence to fight against the undead master. Mind moving. The barren halo that was spinning in the forward direction suddenly reversed, and the endless barren aura emanating from his body madly poured into the corpses with dry wisps at this moment. Next moment, the corpse moved. Under the transformation of this barren power, these corpses with dry cancer, dry scarred eyeballs, and thin bodies became barren puppets. The Knights of Desolation is a desolate puppet, created by Augustine using the corpses of the legendary and epic heroes he devoured as the material. In the previous battle, the Knights of Desolation were not as good as the Death Knights after all, and were annihilated by Agnes. After stepping into the sanctuary, the majestic power of desolation poured out from his body, and this newborn sanctuary Desolation Knight created a new army of desolate puppets. In a very short period of time, the Desolate Legion was born. Confront the sea of undead. Having done this, Augustine took to the sky. The majestic power of desolation in the body continued to pour out and poured into the body of a legendary dragon that had already died in the distance. Then, under the transformation of the power of desolation, the corpse of the legendary dragon quickly dried up, fell, and took shape. A giant dragon like a mummy appeared at the feet of Augustine. As a knight, it is natural to have your own mount. This corpse dragon is Augustine's new mount. Quietly, the alliance of the living is destroyed. Quietly, City of Salvation failed. This decisive battle between the undead and the living, along with the rise of Augustine, turned into a decisive battle between the undead and the desolate. Also dark. Only by blending into the darkness can we fight against the darkness. When driving the corpse dragon into the sky and confronting the undead master, this sentence resounded from Augustine's mind again. Above the earth, the duel between the Desolate Legion and the Undead Legion has begun. Agnes, Kerala, Mist, and Nefarian also rejoined the battlefield at this time above the sky. Sumu stood there quietly, with a faint smile on his face, looking at the knight on the opposite side. Opposite him, Augustine, exuding a terrifying and deadly breath, came riding on a dragon, with a grey baron armor on his body, holding a grey baron lance in his hand, and attacking Sumu with an indomitable aura. In a corner of the City of Salvation, the only two remaining survivors, the legendary assassin and the elf archer, held the sacred weapons in their hands and stared at the showdown between the darkness. Yes, dark and dark duel. Su-mu is the ruler of the undead, the ruler of the undead ocean, and the lord of many high-level undead, naturally representing death and darkness, but the body exudes a deadly breath, devours all life, and brings desolation to the earth. Isn't Augustine a member of the darkness? The living, the resistance to the undead, turned into a confrontation between darkness and darkness. For this huge contrast, the remaining two legendary heroes are somewhat unacceptable, but they again wanted Augustine to win, at least, compared with the undead master. This barren knight who has broken the upper limit of the legendary rank and has unfathomable strength is at least the emperor of the Caesar Empire. He is a member of the Alliance of the Living. Perhaps, when all hope is gone, Augustine, who rises from darkness, is their only hope. They clenched the black knives in their hands and the long bows in their hands, staring at the final confrontation in front of them. On the battlefield, when he became familiar with the power he gained after being promoted to the sanctuary, Augustine rode the corpse dragon without hesitation and flew towards the undead master. He has fallen into the darkness. While gaining incomparably powerful power, it is also affected and eroded by this power. At this time, Augustine clearly felt that countless voices sounded in his mind. He wants to devour the vitality of life. Devour the vitality of the earth. Devour the vitality of the whole world. Let the whole world turn into a wasteland. This is the price. If he can bear the temptation of his own strength and control his own strength with his own mind, he is still Augustine, the emperor of Caesar's empire, and a living creature. If he can't bear the temptation of power, but is controlled by his own power, he is the knight of the Baron, the puppet of the power of Baron, and the terminator of this world. No fluke. When realizing this, Augustine was desperately recalling my life in the past 10 years, recalling the teachings of Caesar via to myself, recalling the tragic fall of the capital of Caesar, recalling the sadness of the fall of Caesar's empire. Hate. When the mind is unable to control the power, the hatred of the undead master becomes his belief against the temptation of his own power. He is obsessed with revenge, obsessed with killing the undead master. With this obsession to implement his own mind, Augustine was reluctantly not seduced by his own power, and incarnates another existence that will end the world. Only, what the young Baron Knight did not know was hatred. It has always been the first emotion that induces a creature to fall and sink. The aura of desolation unfolds. The power of desolation infuses the lance of desolation, and superimposes part of the attributes of the corpse dragon on himself. Augustine turns into a light, soars into the sky at the fastest speed, and attacks Su-mu. The Grey Knight's spear contains the power of desolation. If the enemy is a living creature, there is no need to rely on the sharpness of the barren lance. The strong barren power alone is enough to continuously devour the vitality of the enemy when it hurts it, but his opponent is the undead. It is the undead that has no life, only death and darkness, so the most powerful feature of the desolate knight is useless. Augustine can only defeat the undead master with the powerful power he gained after he was promoted to the sanctuary, and even kill the undead master. Feng. The harsh sound of gold and iron symphony sounded above the sky. Su-mu, who was standing on the spot, did not move and block the barren lance that Augustine stabbed with the skeleton sword in his hand. Sanctuary. For the creatures of Anduin continent, this is a realm that is absolutely impossible to fight. Coupled with the terrible devouring effect of the power of desolation on living beings, it can be said that Augustine at this time is absolutely invincible. But that is for the creatures on Anduin, not for Su-mu. As early as before becoming the dimensional demon god, Su-mu defeated and enslaved the two great sanctuaries of Nightmare Scythe and Banshee King with the help of the rune circle and his own strength. How about now? What's more, he has already achieved the only demon god, and his level has been raised to the limit of level 80. What's more, Augustine, who just broke into the sanctuary, let you know what cruelty is. The real cruelty is to let you gain hope again and again, and destroy your hope again and again. When you have absolute certainty to defeat your enemy, and come full of hope, then use absolute power to destroy all your hopes. Completely shattered, lightly stab, received Augustine's near full blow. Su-mu smiled slightly. His figure flashed, and he appeared in the sky above Augustine and the corpse dragon. Next moment, a pitch-black sword light descended from the sky. The blade flashed by the corpse dragon that was dry. An island was just born. It was cut off by Su-mu with a knife, and it fell toward the ground without even screaming. Augustine was astonished. He can't imagine. You are a sanctuary. Even if the power of desolation has no effect on the undead, shouldn't the power of a sanctuary alone be enough to crush the undead masters? who have not yet entered the sanctuary? Shock followed by anger. He abandoned everything, completely merged into the darkness, turned into darkness. Didn't he just kill the undead master, avenge himself, his father, the Caesar Empire, and the entire continent? Now, he has done everything he can, and abandoned everything he can. Why is he not the opponent of the undead master? After anger, there is anger and despair. A hoarse roar emanated from his voice, and the Baron Knight frantically infused the Baron Lance into the Baron Lance, and attacked Sumu frantically. A dense collision sounded high in the sky. Only with every collision between the skeleton sword and the Baron Lance, Sumu crushed Augustine with absolute power, causing the newly promoted sanctuary to retreat again and again, and to despair again and again. Every time he retreats, Augustine's anger grows a little more. Every despair, the power of desolation is pure. Under the burning fire of revenge, Augustine's heart is being swallowed by his own power. The Imperial Emperor, who had just merged into the darkness, was also sliding towards the deepest part of the darkness. Boom, 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 bombardment again and again, repel Augustine again and again. Sumu is also sensing the changes in Augustine. The power of desolation is becoming more and more intense, and the trace of dead silence is becoming more and more clear. When the anger completely devoured Augustine's mind, when the power of desolation completely devoured Augustine's heart, he no longer wastes time. Combat power increase, open. When Augustine attacked again, Sumu flicked lightly, dodging this attack. Then, infinite power was poured into the skeleton sword. Sumu broke out all his strength for the first time, and slammed into the Baron Lance. The grey Baron Lance flew out. Augustine was approached by an incomparable force, and was directly smashed into the ground by Sumu's irresistible blow from a high altitude, mercilessly embedded in the thick slate on the ground of the City of Salvation. Before Augustine got up again, Sumu's figure appeared. One foot stepped on the back of the desolate knight, and one of Sumu's hands stretched out and covered Augustine's head. Sanctuary, desolate knight, desolate power. If it wasn't for Augustine's potential, he wanted the Emperor, who had mastered the power of desolation, to put himself under his command after he advanced to the sanctuary. Why should the pastor allow Augustine to advance? Advanced defeat, enslavement, subdue. This is what Sumu thinks. Today, Augustine has shown that he is no less powerful than the Nightmare Mirror and the Banshee King, and has shown his potential far beyond the Nightmare Scythe and the Banshee King. Time to give up. The cool unknown energy gradually poured into Augustine's body through Sumu's arm, and began to erode his body. At this moment, panic and fury took over his face. He clearly felt that this never-before-seen energy, in terms of purity and mystery, far exceeded Wang Dehao, the power of desolation he possessed. When the unknown energy invades, Augustine is losing control of his body. When he prepares to mobilize the force of desolation against this force, the force of desolation collapses. Fallen, sinking, feeling the erosion of the unknown energy on him, feeling that he was losing control of his body and strength little by little, Augustine's heart was filled with indescribable fear. He is not afraid of death, on the contrary. In order to prevent himself from being eroded by his own power and become another undead master, he would rather perish with the undead master in this battle. He is not afraid of the dark. When he made the decision to merge into the darkness and fight against the darkness, Augustine was mentally prepared to sleep forever and never see a trace of light again. But he is afraid of sinking. He is afraid that the Dragon Slayer will eventually become a dragon. In order to fight against the darkness, he chose to blend into the darkness. In order to fight against the undead master, he chose to become a Baron Knight. But he is still not the opponent of the undead master, and when the unknown energy gradually eroded his body and began to erode his head and soul, he finally knew how the undead master had subdued the unknown species of bone-eating worms. The Dragon Slayer will eventually become a dragon, only he knew it too late. Above the sky, the only two remaining legendary heroes were stunned a moment ago. They have witnessed the birth of a sanctuary and the appearance of another Dark King, who is no less than the undead ruler. When they are still wondering, will this newly born King of Darkness become the next undead master, the next terrifying existence that threatens the entire continent? Next moment, the Knights of Desolation were defeated by the Ravages. The Baron Lance was lost, and the Baron Knight himself was firmly suppressed on the ground, unable to move. Augustine was struggling. He ordered himself to bring back the Desolate Legion that he had just transformed into, trying to let the Desolate Legion create a chance for him to break free from the domination of the undead. However, all the millions of the Desolate Legion were killed by Agnes and other high-level undead, as well as more. The ocean of undead blocked. Those two legendary heroes were not having a good time either. After beheading all the legendary dragons, who came to the City of Salvation. The high-spirited Nefarian set his sights on these two legendary heroes. Even if it is just two legendary heroes, they are still enough to entangle with Nefarian when they hold the holy relic. It's just that these two legendary heroes are still staring at the battle between the Undead Master and the Baron Knight. The holy artifact in their hands. The main target is the Undead Master, so one chase and two escapes. The two remaining survivors were extremely embarrassed. When the battle is over, when the Knights of Desolation were suppressed, and the Lord of the Undead came to a standstill for some reason, these two legendary heroes seem to have found an opportunity, looked at each other, no more language needed. The legendary assassin holding the black sword of the holy artifact flickered, and charged towards the incoming Nefarian, inspiring the power of the holy artifact to fight this powerful ghost dragon, and the elf archer standing high in the sky. The elven archer poured all his magic into the emerald longbow. 613 A simple holy weapon attack can't hurt the Undead Master. She already knew this, but as a holy weapon of long-range attack type, the power of the emerald longbow's self-destruction is far less than that of other holy weapons, so the only remaining elven legend made a decision. Use your own life to inspire all the power of the emerald green longbow. Guide all the power in the holy weapon longbow with your will. Maximize the power of the holy weapon, seize this last chance, and attack the Undead Master. Magic infusion. The longbow, which was originally emerald green, radiated a more emerald green light at this moment. The two branches that were originally on the longbow actually grew 2 leaves. With the injection of magic power, the elf archer slowly pulled the bowstring of the longbow. At this moment, her face turned pale, and at this moment, the wisps of emerald green began to gather on the bowstring of the longbow. When an emerald green arrow was formed on the longbow, and the elf archer also pulled the bowstring of the longbow to the extreme, this very ordinary-looking emerald green arrow burst out of the air and attacked the Undead Master at the same time. The longbow of the holy artifact turned into countless fragments, and the elf archer, who released the full power of the holy artifact, also quietly fell at this moment. This is a powerful blow. When you have enough time to prepare, when you integrate your own beliefs in life, when you guide all the power of the longbow of the holy artifact and condense it into a green arrow, the power of this arrow shot by the elf archer is almost extreme. Condensing all the energy contained in a holy artifact into an arrow, the power of this arrow has surpassed the holy artifact, and even surpassed the self-exploding holy artifact. Nefarian let out a long roar, breathing out his death breath, freezing the legendary assassin into ice cubes. It flapped its wings desperately, but it was nowhere near the speed of that emerald arrow. Agnes galloped on her horse, trying to rush to Suma's side before the emerald arrow arrived, and blocked the arrow for him, but the speed was too slow after all. Kerala let out a wailing, and sent countless Baron puppets flying out, turning reality into nothingness, and sprinting towards the ground. Mist slashed out with a sword, and the sword energy of 100 Jong crossed the void, trying to fly the green arrows. Seem, in their hearts, they all believed that this emerald arrow was enough to hurt themselves to the Lord. When this whistling came, Sumu, who was immersed in the slavery of Augustine, also found the green arrow that struck. The elves are best at plant magic. Plants represent life, and life is the opposite of death, so, in a sense, this emerald arrow, which condenses all the energy of a holy artifact and contains extremely huge vitality, is indeed Suma's nemesis. Not only that, as the sacred artifact of the elves, the arrow shot by the emerald longbow has the dual effect of breaking the air and locking. That is, even if Nefarian and the others were fast enough to block Sumu before the emerald arrow, the arrow would not hurt them, but locked Sumu until they hit the target. A surefire hit, perhaps. Arrows hit, maintaining the erosion of Augustine. Sumu stretched out a hand covering his hands, and grabbed towards that emerald arrow, without hindrance. This arrow pierced through Suma's hand, and also through Suma's palm, and, after breaking through Suma's body defense, this arrow, which condensed extremely huge vitality, released all the vitality contained in it, and began to erode Suma's body. The breath of death and darkness can erode life. Endless vitality can also corrode the undead. This huge vitality are constantly wiping out the breath of death and darkness in Suma's body, as well as his skeleton armor and body, that are comparable to the holy artifact. If you let it go, this huge vitality, it is really possible to make Sumu fall. However, Sumu remained calm. When the huge vitality began to erode his arm armor was broken layer by layer, and his arm also withered. Sumu thought, the vitality that was enough to make him fall, instantly disappeared. Do not forget, Sumu is not only the undead master, but also the dimension demon. That vigor and vitality, was extremely dangerous to Sumu today. but it was a sweet treat for a plane that had expanded to 7,000 kilometers in diameter. Even the void currents can be resisted, and the void energy can be swallowed up. Eating the vitality, and vitality represented by a holy artifact, is just a small supplement to his dimension plane. Subsequently, the huge and pure breath of death and darkness continued to pour out, constantly repairing withered arms and broken back armor. Sumu easily survived this crisis. The last legendary hero dies, except for Augustine, the desolate knight who has merged into the darkness. There is no longer a living being in the entire city of salvation. Erosion continues, without outside interference. Suma's erosion this time went extremely smoothly, but more than 10 minutes later, a crisp system prompt sounded in his mind. Ding! You have gained control of the Knights of Desolation, Augustine. You've enslaved Knights of Desolation, Augustine. The system prompt is the best sign. After taking a look at the refreshed information on the attribute panel, Sumu smiled slightly pity. There is no job transfer information for the Desolate Knight class. Desolate Knight, essentially derived from Augustine's talent. Desolate Knight is also one of the ultimate occupations that can destroy the world. Such a profession is unique. As long as Augustine is still there, no other existence can obtain the transfer information of the Desolate Knight in any way. Baron. Letting go of Augustine, Sumu tasted these two words carefully. Baron. It can be said to be the superior concept of hunger and famine. Baron die. Desolate Knight, Death Knight. Slowly, Sumu smiled. The appearance of the bone-eating worm gave Sumu the gluttonous insect king, and opened his ambition to form the 7 deadly sins. Does the surrender of the Knights of Desolation now also signify the presence of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? Desolate Knight, Augustine, Death Knight, Agnes. Still less War Knights and Plague Knights. Seem gathering the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is easier than gathering the 7 deadly sins. Are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the Doomsday Apocalypse, coupled with the 7 deadly sins, he is really going to become the legendary Demon King. From then on, you are the second of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the Knight of Desolation. First, of course it is Agnes who is the representative of the Death Knight. When Augustine got up from the ground, Suma's voice followed. In the silence, the Desolate Knight knelt down on one knee. Augustine, the Desolate Knight. See the king. Click. The projection array shattered. The more than 1.5 million undead camp players spent a full 3 months before the projection formations built around the cities were also shattered. The battle for salvation is over. The alliance of the living was a complete failure. The last scene that the cities, races, and countless creatures saw was the scene where Augustine, who was promoted to the sanctuary, was defeated without any resistance and surrendered to the undead master. The decisive battle failed. Continent ends. When all the powerhouses were buried in the city of salvation, Anduin continent has lost all the power to resist. What will the future be like? Is it that the endless undead natural disaster drowned the whole world, turning the entire Anduin continent into a dead world, where there are no living beings, only the undead are rampant? Or is it like now, all living beings are shrouded in the undead ruled by the terror rule? No one knows. This is unknown. Just like the waiting and torment before death comes, it is precisely because of this unknown that the entire continent's beings have fallen into a state of constant fear. Fear spreads. The power of fear continues to gather, and the fear emanating from these countless creatures has also become the best resource for mastering the power of fear and breaking into the sanctuary. The battle is over. Even the Baron Knights have become one of the apocalyptic knights under Sumu, not to mention the Baron legions transformed from the many Baron powers. No enemies. The battle naturally ended. Of course, Sumu has a lot to do. The first thing to do is to break the upper limit of the legendary rank, Advanced Sanctuary. The next thing, basically don't have to worry about Sumu himself. The undead army collected the pieces of equipment that fell, and let Sumu put it in his storage space, and then took it out as a reward for the undead camp players. Of the dozen or so holy artifacts, 3 were obtained by Sumu, except for the self-exploding one. He can't use it himself, so it's good to use it to reward his subordinates. In addition to equipment, there are a large number of other minerals, resources, magic crystals, etc. These resources, gathered from dozens of countries and more than a dozen races, can be no less than the collection of the undead empire, and even more. 1. Even now, by incorporating these minerals, resources and magic crystals into his dimensional plane, Sumu can greatly shorten the growth time of the dimensional plane. Finally, it is the millions of undead and millions of desolate puppets in the city of salvation, undead disaster, because they are summoned by skills. The ranks of these undead are high and low, and there are many undead in the Lord and Epic ranks. However, these undead have a common feature, that is, low intelligence. It is the Epic rank, and basically there is no value in continuing to cultivate. For these undead, Suma's way of dealing with it is to let the gluttonous insect king eat them all. Of course, also because of the summoning, the bones of these undead are far inferior to those of the undead that grow up normally. However, under the accumulation of millions or even tens of millions, when the gluttonous insect king spent 3 or 4 days devouring all the undead, its rank suddenly increased from a low-rank legend to a high-rank legend. It's not just the attack and defense that are greatly increased. If the gluttonous insect king splits apart at this time, I am afraid that even the existence of the legendary peak can be eaten up. Under the sanctuary, Sumu has another big killer again. Among the high-level undead, Mist is still stuck at the peak of the legendary rank, unable to progress. It is worth mentioning that, because of this barbarian ancestor's warning, in this alliance of the living, the barbarians are probably the only living creatures that have not joined the alliance of the living, and are still entrenched in their own territory. The undead are irreversible, and the undead cannot be cut, whether it's because of the warnings of his ancestors, or because of the fear of Suma's terrifying strength. In short, in the current Anduin continent, I am afraid that the barbarians are the only humanoid races that retain a small number of legendary heroes and epic heroes, and are the most powerful humanoid races. Agnes and Kerala have also improved in strength, the level of being promoted from a mid-level legend to an upper-level legend. However, if you want to step into the peak legend, or even start to look for the opportunity to enter your own advanced sanctuary, I am afraid that it cannot be done in a short period of time. Finally, it's Nefarian. In addition to Sumu, this war, I'm afraid that Nefarian is the most rewarding of all the high-level undead under Sumu. This kind of gain does not refer to rank and rank. Nefarian has already stepped into the pinnacle of the legendary rank, and there is no way to advance in this world. It refers to its opportunity to advance to the sanctuary. Yes, Nefarian found his opportunity to advance to the sanctuary, and its opportunity is Dragon Island. Perhaps because of the fall of hundreds of years ago, it fell into a bone dragon. In the following time, Nefarian has been under the pursuit from Dragon Island because, for the arrogant legendary dragons, it is undoubtedly their shame that a dragon has fallen into a bone dragon. This kind of pursuit starts from Nefarian becoming a bone dragon, and continues until it has grown into a ghost dragon at the peak of legend, in these hundreds of thousands of years. And, even though it has grown into a legendary pinnacle from the ghost dragon, Long Island has never given up chasing and killing, and has never given up to obliterate the greatest shame of this legendary giant dragon family. So, when Sumu appeared in the city of the undead, Nefarian and Argus sheltered each other, entrenched in the city of the undead, and did not dare to leave a step. So, after reaching the peak of the legendary rank, the existence of the Dragon Island has become the most feared existence of the ghost dragon, that should have been tyrannical and proud. At the same time, it is also the knot that prevents it from entering the sanctuary from the legendary peak, a war. Nefarian personally killed several legendary dragons from Dragon Island. This also made him realize the opportunity for his own advancement. Dragon Island, and the fear of Dragon Island. Perhaps, as long as you obliterate Long Island with your own hands, and personally break your fear of Long Island, the ghost dragon, who returned from death, will be able to successfully break your bottleneck and enter the sanctuary. Subsequently, Nefarian left. It has to go to Long Island in person and open its own advanced road with the destruction of Long Island. This was Nefarian's path to the sanctuary, and Sumu naturally would not refuse. The only thing he did was to hand over the gluttonous insect king, who had stepped into the upper legend, to Nefarian. With the imprint of the king, Nefarian can borrow Sumu's power at any time, and the gluttonous insect king is enough to ensure the safety of this ghost dragon trip to Long Island. Got here, this war is all over. For the City of Salvation, Sumu has never seen a city as majestic as the City of Salvation, even in the sum of his past and present lives. So, he kept the city. In the future, in his spare time, perhaps he can remodel this City of Salvation as his base camp in the Anduin continent. After all, a city that condenses the wisdom essence and peak skills of dozens of countries and more than a dozen races in the Anduin continent is placed in those high-energy main material worlds. Such a city is also rare. Anyway, as the end of Anduin continent, I am afraid that few people dare to step into this city. He has time to slowly transform. Subsequently, after modifying the teleportation array of the City of Salvation, Sumu directly took the high-level undead under his command to teleport from the City of Salvation to the City of Bones. Augustine, the Baron Knight, is naturally on the list. It is worth mentioning that, after being enslaved by Sumu, Augustine, like many other high-level undead, still retains his memory and consciousness. Among them, there is naturally the memory of Caesar VII and Carola. Carola has been sleeping since she was born. To Augustine, Carola just felt a little kind, but she didn't have any memory related to Augustine. For Augustine, this ghost queen is his sister. Carola became the ghost queen under her command. Augustine also became the Baron Knight under her command. After returning to the City of Bones, Sumu handed over the frozen body of Caesar via to Augustine. Erosion. Talent is absolute. Once enslaved, there is no possibility of betrayal. Even the idea of betrayal will not be born. Returning the corpse of Caesar via to Augustine is one of Augustine's thoughts that Sumu understood. Zero asked for flowers. Subsequently, after completing the main quest, the end of Anduin continent, and handing over the redemption authority for all rewards to Argus, and letting Argus complete the exchange of contributions from the undead camp players, Sumu returned to the undead castle among. On the Anduin continent, Sumu has too few people. The follow-up processing of this main material world also needs help from the Undead Empire, and getting help from the Undead Empire is bound to alarm the first consul. So, everything goes back to the original question. Sumu, first of all, you must advance to the sanctuary. Gain the strength to have an equal dialogue with the first Archon. Undead Castle on the throne. When the City of Bones was back on track, Sumu opened his attribute panel at this time. On his attribute panel, the number of free points has changed from 630 to 1,500. Although it is incomparable with the development dimension plane before, it is enough to let him master a source of power. Death Halo, Aura of Fear. The two Halo skills are upgraded to the last level, all of which allow Sumu to master a source power, namely the power of death and the power of fear. But how to master it is the problem. Like this time, it took more than 3 months to gather the powerhouses of the Anduin continent to kill them all in one go, and then broadcast the whole battle scene live to all the creatures on the continent. Only then did he obtain enough fear emotion to activate the advance of the fear halo in this way. As long as the fear aura is raised to the limit with free points, he will be able to advance smoothly. But death halo, in the world, there is no such emotion as death. At least for now, Sumu doesn't know how to collect the power of death and activate the advancement of the death aura. Naturally, he could not use the power of death as the source of his advanced sanctuary. Regret, maybe a little. But now that he has obtained the death halo, when he finds the method of the power of death, he can still advance it, and master the power of death represented by the death halo. No one has ever said that the sanctuary can only hold one kind of power. At best, it is a matter of sooner or later. Subsequently, Sumu focused his attention on the already lit aura of fear. With 100 free points consumed, the level of fear aura has been increased from level 1 to level 2. After understanding the consumption of the level of fear aura, Sumu no longer hesitated, and continued to use 100 points as a unit to invest free points into the fear aura again, and again to improve the level of this skill. 900 free points to invest. The skill level of fear aura has reached the full level of 10, when he continued to put 500 free points into it according to his previous experience. A whole new force is born from within Sumu, fear, the power of fear. At this time, on the skill bar of the Sumu attribute panel, the skill aura of fear has disappeared. New skills are not generated from the skill bar. Instead is a new status bar. Origin, the power of fear. So far, Sumu's first plan can be said to be over. As long as he returns to the Anriel continent, he will be able to take advantage of the situation to break through from the peak of the legendary rank to the sanctuary. The battle for salvation is over. The impact of this war is just beginning. The aborigines of the Anduin continent, the countless living beings, are in constant fear. No one knows when the undead natural disaster will strike, and no one knows when the world will sink. They can only wait continuously in the torment of death. The players of the undead camp are naturally happy. Sumu's goal is achieved, and naturally there are various rewards. When the more than 1.5 million undead camp players completed their tasks and returned to the City of Bones, a lot of contributions were received. Relying on these contributions, they can either exchange jobs, or exchange equipment, or exchange items, experience points, and attribute points, making their already strong strength a big step forward. On the contrary, the players in the camp of the living are gloomy. In the battle of the City of Salvation, countless players died, their levels dropped, and then they returned to reality. The death of these players has reduced the strength of the players of the entire living camp. Although, among the server continents, the players in the Anduin continent are still the best, but they are not as good as the players in the undead camp. Of course, not every player is involved in the battle for salvation. There are more than 3 million players in the living camp, and there will always be some players who do not participate in this battle because of this or that 617 reason. They either hid in the mountains or in the villages, and were not affected by this battle. On the contrary, they successfully survived this battle of salvation, allowing them to gain a lot of contribution only. When the top level of the Living Alliance was wiped out, and all the resources, equipment and energy were taken away by Sumu, they had no way to exchange these contribution points for corresponding occupations, equipment and props. Only experience points and attribute points can be selected. All in all, players who participated in the Battle of Salvation suffered heavy losses, while those who fled and avoided benefited a lot. This huge contrast is the biggest injustice of the League of the Living. At the same time, when millions of players died in the City of Salvation and returned to the real world, the official forum of Second World was completely detonated by this ultimate battle. Original. When the two main quests were released, a large number of players from other server continents were paying attention to this battle. A world-class main quest not only affects every player in the Anduin continent, but also has great reference significance for players in other server continents. The battle for salvation begins. Countless players even gave up fighting monsters to upgrade in the game world, but instead waited on the forum, waiting for the result of this battle. When the news came, when the pictures and videos appeared on the forum along with the posts, all the players were shocked. They shake the grandeur of the City of Salvation. They shocked the number of undead scourges. They lamented the sacrifices of the Aborigines. They are even more afraid of the power of the undead ruler. In all fairness, not only Anduin continent, the undead master appears in any server continent, and the fate of that world will be similar to Anduin continent, or even inferior to Anduin continent. Anduin continent is like this, and it has entered hell mode from now on. Who knows if other server continents will be like Anduin continent in the future. There will be this kind of ultimate boss that can destroy the world. No one knows. In short, a battle of salvation made Sumu, the undead master, become the most famous monster boss among players, and also the most powerful monster boss in the minds of players. At least so far, among the various villains and monster bosses that players have come into contact with, none of them are qualified to be compared with the undead master. Finally, players of the living camp, when their death cooling period ended and they returned to the game world, they found that they could no longer be resurrected in the City of Salvation, and could only be resurrected to other cities. And when they were resurrected, they didn't find the undead natural disaster that was raging. Except, there is no such powerful hero, except, everyone lives in the emotion of fear. That city seems to be no different from before. Of course, the inheritance is cut off, and the road to promotion is cut off. This is the biggest problem. It's just that players haven't realized this yet. The first thing they see is the vacancies left in the countless cities in the entire game world after the heroes died in battle. A time to snatch these important positions, and even to rule a city with the strength that is no less than that of NPCs, to become king by yourself, is the primary event for the players of the living camp. When the players of the undead camp received their rewards, their strength increased greatly. When the players of the living camp returned to the game, and began to fight for power, Sumu had already left the Anduin continent. After the two main material worlds have left their own space beacons, Sumu can freely go back and forth between the two main material worlds without resorting to the boundary teleportation array, just by opening his own dimension plane. Enter, one out. After Sumu left his dimension plane again, he had already appeared in the Anreal continent, and the Lich City of the Undead Empire. City Lord's Mansion. When Suma's figure appeared, Willis had already learned of the arrival of his lord based on the feeling between his souls, and hurriedly brought several Lich Kings to the place where Sumu appeared. After listening to Willis' report, and everything was normal in the Undead Empire, Sumu began to retreat in the City Lord's Mansion. The level has reached the upper limit of level 80. The power of the source has also been mastered. Sumu only needs to completely integrate the power of the source with himself, and turn it into his own power, and he can smoothly enter the sanctuary from the peak of the legendary rank. For him, it's simple. It just takes a little time. Subsequently, Sumu began to retreat in this City Lord's Mansion. Willis took the Lich King and the Great Lich under his command to carry out the orders of his lord, and prepare for the next stage of Suma's plan. In a flash, it was 3 days. When the third day was over, a huge vortex of vitality appeared in the sky above the Lich City, sweeping the endless vitality and energy between heaven and earth, instilling it into the Lich City. If it is said that, when he advanced from the epic to the legend, the Yuan Chi vortex that appeared due to Suma's advancement covered a range of hundreds of kilometers, this time the advanced sanctuary. The Yuan Chi vortex he set off covered thousands of them. Kilometer range, a vortex of vitality in such a range, not to mention the Lich City, and the area ruled by Willis, even the City of Death, the capital of the Undead Emperor, thousands of miles away can clearly feel it. Vortex rises, pulling endless vitality and energy into Suma's body. Forge City. The dwarf skeleton leader was slightly silent, checked the information from Willis, and then a series of orders were conveyed, allowing the dwarf skeleton blacksmiths in the City of Blacksmithing to produce all kinds of equipment. Dark City. The Bone Dragon Knight raised his head, glanced in the direction of the Lich City, then stepped into the teleportation formation and teleported towards the Lich City dark jungle. When feeling the energy fluctuations, the bone demon spider climbed off its spider web and stayed on the ground to show respect to its lord. Nightmare City and Banshee City. I felt that this energy fluctuation came from my master, and I felt that this energy fluctuation was the fluctuation of my master's advanced sanctuary. The Nightmare Scythe and the Banshee King rushed to the Lich City for the first time. Go the other side. In a desolate and unnamed ancient tomb, the tall and slender Rhoda Monroe raised his head slightly, looking in the direction of the Lich City through the layers of tombs, and a hoarse voice came out intermittently. Who is the sanctuary? Go and see. City of the Dead. After perceiving the energy fluctuations brought by Suma's advanced sanctuary, the Dark Priest was amazed. Every undead who has entered the legendary pinnacle has the potential to break through the sanctuary, such as himself, such as several other Imperial consuls, but the energy fluctuation of this breakthrough came from the Lich City, and the owner of the Lich City, the Lich King Willis, had clearly fallen from the legendary peak during the last Imperial meeting. Inexplicable. In the mind of the Dark Priest, the figure of Willis Lord, that strange undead, the seventh consul that the Empire trusted. It's him. Anyway, an undead advanced sanctuary is a major event for the entire undead empire, so after thinking for a moment, the Dark Priest took out a small skull with a faint blue flame in the eye socket from his storage space. Mind moving transmission of the undead advanced sanctuary and related speculations about himself into the skull. The Dark Sacrifice paused slightly and walked towards the teleportation array outside the temple. Soon, Bone Dragon Knight appeared in Lich City. The Banshee King and the Nightmare Mirror also appeared in Lich City. The teleportation array is closed, together with Willis and the Lich King under his command. After the appearance of the four consuls of the Undead Empire, they occupied a wall of the Lich City, as if they were guarding against something. Even Willis has raised the defensive circles of the Lich City. The vortex of vitality continues. The advancement of Sumu is also continuing. 5.5 After half a day, the primordial vortex over the Lich City has not decreased, but has a tendency to gradually expand. At this time, the first figure appeared outside the Lich City, tall and slender, covered with dirty ribbons. This figure is the second consul of the Undead Empire, the undead boss of the Median Sanctuary, Rhoda Monroe. Appearing in the high sky outside the Lich City, Rhoda Monroe's infiltrating eyes swept across the Banshee King, Nightmare Mirror, Willis and the Bone Dragon Knight, and finally stopped at the defense method array. He has no other action, just standing there, staring at the city of the Lich, and at a figure in the city master's mansion, who was breaking through as if he really just came to witness the birth of a sanctuary undead. Not long after Rhoda Monroe arrived, the Dark Priest also appeared in the high sky outside the Lich City. Unlike Rhoda Monroe, after seeing the rising defensive circle, and the other four Imperial consuls guarding the city walls of the Lich City, the Dark Priest's expression suddenly turned gloomy. Next moment, a message, quietly passed through the small skull, was sent out by the Dark Sacrifice. Perhaps Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest really just came to witness the advancement of Sumu, and the birth of the fifth sanctuary undead in the Undead Empire. Or maybe, because of the rise of the defensive circle, and the appearance of the other four Imperial consuls, they had to suppress some of the careful thoughts in their hearts. In short, except at the beginning, the Dark Priest sent a message, and in the following time, neither Rhoda Monroe nor the Dark Priest made any further actions. Just stand there and witness Suma's progression. Time flies. The later on, the larger the energy fluctuations emanating from Suma's body, and the larger the area covered by the primordial vortex above the Lich City. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, thousands of miles, 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles. When the fifth day came, the primordial vortex that appeared above the Lich King had already expanded its coverage to a radius of 5,000 miles. Such a horrific sight, not to mention peak legends such as Willis, even the Banshee King, the Mirror of Nightmare, and even Rhoda Monroe, are only seen in life. To know, even these three sanctuaries, the primordial chi vortex they set off when they advanced into the sanctuary only covered a few hundred miles. The coverage area of the primordial chi vortex is not proportional to the strength after the undead advanced sanctuary, but everyone knows, when breaking through the sanctuary, the larger the vortex of vitality, it means that an undead needs more energy to advance, which means that the undead's background is more abundant, and the potential after advanced is greater. Unconsciously, because of the vortex of vitality that was only seen in his life, the last thought of Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest disappeared quietly. They calmed down and waited patiently for the end of this advancement, also waiting patiently the birth of the fifth sanctuary undead of the Empire. Until the fifth day ends, the primordial vortex in the sky gradually dissipated, and a thick pressure also radiated from the city of the Lich. The advancement of Sumu the Undead Master, the 7th consul of the Empire, is finally over. Inside the City Lord's mansion, when the primordial vortex dissipated, Sumu also restrained the energy aura and the pressure belonging to the sanctuary that he unconsciously exuded into the sanctuary. His heart was full of joy. The legendary occupation is the end of the occupation template. Therefore, after this advancement, his career template will not change, and the attribute growth brought about by the upgrade of the level will not change, but from the legendary rank to the sanctuary, his health and magic values have undergone huge changes. The life bonus has been increased from the original 10 million to 50 million. The magic power bonus has been increased from the original 5 million to 30 million. Just this has allowed Suma's survivability to grow several times again. Of course, the most important change is not this. From the legendary advanced sanctuary, he used it to break through the original ability of the sanctuary, the power of fear, and it has truly become the original ability possessed by Sumu. Sanctuary. The biggest feature of this rank is the localization of skills. The so-called nativization of skills is to transform the skills and abilities mastered by one from the shackles of occupation templates and attribute templates, and truly become their own abilities. In this way, even if the rules of the game disappear, the attribute panel and the occupation template disappear in the future, these native skills and abilities will not disappear along with them because they have become abilities that a sanctuary truly masters. Same, because of the originalization of skills, those skills are no longer bound by occupation templates and skill panels, but are completely under the control of the existence of the sanctuary. For example, disaster is coming. If one day this skill is also originalized, after Sumu releases this skill, the required mana consumption is not a fixed 10,000 points per second. He can choose to consume 1 magic point to summon only 1 undead. He can also choose to consume 10 million magic points instantly to summon a huge number of undead natural disasters. Other skills too. The originalization of skills and the superb control of skills are the hallmarks of the sanctuary. From the legendary rank to the sanctuary, there are still many changes in Sumu, but now is not the time to explore these. Rhoda Monroe was still outside the city, and so was the Dark Priest. Now that the advanced level has been completed, Sumu naturally has to come forward and say hello to these two consuls who originally did not want to provoke the Empire. Subsequently, Sumu smiled slightly, rose into the air, and walked towards the outside of the Lich City. Advanced is over. The 4 consuls breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, when a piece of information came from the soul, Willis lifted the defensive circle of the Lich City, and the other 3 Imperial consuls also lifted the tension of the sword. Inside the Lich City, when Suma's figure appeared in the sky above the City Lord's mansion, walking towards the direction of Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest, the Banshee King, Nightmare Mirror, Willis, Bone Dragon Knight, and many Lich Kings and Grand Lichs in Lich City knelt down on one knee at the same time and shouted in unison, "Congratulations to the Advanced Sanctuary. Advanced is complete. Sumu already has the strength to surpass Rhoda Monroe and face the first consul. So, no need to hide anymore." The scene of the 4 consuls guarding Suma's advancement has long been seen by Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest, and there is no need to conceal the relationship between them. He waved his hand, signaling his subordinates to get up. Sumu continued to walk outside the Lich City. Outside Lich City, when Suma's figure gradually approached, the Dark Priest's expression was extremely complicated. Who would have thought that in just over a year, the legendary skeleton who appeared in the Imperial Hall and declared himself the 7th consul of the Empire had already advanced to the sanctuary? Who would have thought that, without anyone noticing, the 7th consul of the Empire had quietly subdued the other 4 consuls and made them the master? Even, it also includes 2 sanctuary archons. Here are 4. The skeleton spider of the dark jungle and the dwarf skeleton leader of the city of forging have never arrived. But looking at this, I am afraid that the 2 archons have already surrendered to the 7th archon, right? Before you know it, a powerful undead rises. Unconsciously, the high-level empire was subdued by more than half. Faced with this situation, it is no wonder that the Dark Sacrifice Society has a complicated mood. Taking a deep breath, he bowed slightly to Sumu who was approaching, and the Dark Sacrificial said respectfully, "Congratulations to the 7th consul for entering the Advanced Sanctuary. However, I am afraid that in the future, Your Excellency will not be the 7th consul of the Empire, but the Emperor of the Empire." The 3rd consul, "Congratulations." A hoarse and harsh voice came from Rhoda Monroe's bandaged mouth, and after a slight pause, the 2nd consul of the Empire added, "Second." It means, at this time, Rhoda Monroe believes that Sumu has surpassed himself, so, even if it is Ray-ranked, this new sanctuary undead should be the 2nd consul of the Empire, not the 3rd consul. In the mouth of the Dark Sacrificial, second Second, the mood of the dark sacrifice is more complicated. He was silent for a while, but he still didn't forget his business after all. Facing Sumu slightly, the dark priest said softly, "Your Excellency the second consul, the first consul is invited. I invite you and your excellencies to go to the imperial palace together." After saying these words, the dark priest was a little nervous. He didn't know whether Sumu conquered other imperial consuls, simply because he wanted to increase his own strength and power, or if he had other ideas if the latter one. The four consuls of Lich City mainly recognized Sumu, and even Rhoda Monroe bluntly said that he is not Sumu's opponent, and he is in danger, even with absolute confidence in the first consul. But the dark sacrifice is also clear that the first consul will not easily take action. Even if the first consul took the turmoil that followed, it could spread to the entire Undead Empire. In this way, whether it is the collection of the Dark Titan's beliefs or others, it will be greatly affected. Fortunately, what the Dark Priest feared did not happen. When he said the invitation from the first consul, Sumu not only did not refuse, but chuckled lightly. "This king has just advanced, and I want to meet the first consul, His Excellency. It's better." 617. Let's go to the City of Death together. With a sigh of relief in his heart, the Dark Priest hurriedly agreed, and Rhoda Monroe on the side did not object, nodding slightly, and following behind Sumu towards the teleportation formation of Lich City. Lich City is back to normal. Arranged the Lich King and the Great Lich in the city to continue to produce the items designated by the Lord. Willis and the other three consuls followed Sumu, Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest into the teleportation array, and appeared in the Undead, the imperial capital of the Empire, in the City of Death. Entering the City of the Dead for the second time. At this time, Sumu's mood was very different from when he first came to the city. The first time he came here, even though he was very confident in his abilities, Sumu also clearly knew that in the huge Undead Empire, in front of the four undead spirits in the sanctuary, he was still far behind. Come this time, in the entire Undead Empire, except for the mysterious and unpredictable first consul, there is nothing that can make him jealous. Advanced Sanctuary, meet with the first consul, and then start your next plan. This is what Sumu planned. Even without the invitation of the first consul, he will come sooner or later. Come out of the teleportation array and enter the imperial palace. Sumu, who was at the forefront, did not go to the second position adjacent to the first consul, but continued to sit in the position belonging to the seventh consul as before. When Sumu was seated, the Banshee King and others were also seated one by one. After some hesitation, Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest respectively took the positions of the second and fifth consuls. However, this time, sitting in the position that originally belonged to them, they were fidgeting like needles. The seating of the seven consuls seemed to be a signal. When Rhoda Monroe and the Dark Priest also sat down separately, a circle of faint blue flames rose, and a strange human figure was outlined on the position of the first consul at the same time. The soul fluctuations belonging to the first consul also slowly spread in the Imperial Hall. "Your Excellency Sumu, congratulations." Advanced Sanctuary. With a congratulations from the first consul, the atmosphere in the entire Imperial Hall suddenly eased. With a slight salute to the first consul, Sumu attentively felt the human figure outlined by the faint blue flame in front of him different from the first time. This time, Sumu could already feel the presence of the first archon through his own perception at the same time. He also understood why when he first saw the first consul, even if he initiated the phase shift, it was difficult for him to escape from the first consul's control. The first consul is a high-level sanctuary. The first consul is the Dimension Demon God. On the road of Dimension Demon God, a consul should have developed his dimensional plane to the level of a medium plane, or even a large plane spatial overlap. This should be a new effect that was born after the plane of the Dimension Demon God developed to a medium plane, or even a large plane. That is to say, while appearing here, the first consul also overlapped with a part of the Imperial Hall with his own dimension plane. As long as he is willing, he can pull the existence of the entire Imperial Hall into his own dimension plane at any time. A high-level sanctuary. In his own dimension plane, he is naturally invincible. He has also stepped into the sanctuary, and also has his own dimension plane. Sumu can only escape into his own dimension plane when the first consul's dimension plane is unfolding, avoiding the space overlap of the first consul. If you want to confront the first consul head-on is still not enough, but this alone has given Sumu an equal opportunity to talk to the first consul. Sumu was looking at the first consul, and the first consul was also looking at Sumu. Perhaps it was because he felt the increase in the combat power of Sumu from the dimension plane, and knew that he could no longer pose a threat to this new sanctuary undead, and the attitude of the first consul toward Sumu also eased a lot. Not like the next one, but like a partner. Since then, His Excellency Sumu has been the second consul of the empire. While this king is away, the second consul is in charge of everything in the empire, except for the foundation of the empire. Everything else can be decided by the second consul. The foundation of the so-called empire. It is the belief of the countless intelligent creatures living in the undead empire on the Dark Titan. This is the fundamental purpose of the first consul, to establish the undead empire, and also the foundation of the existence of the undead empire. After hearing the words of the first consul, Sumu repeated, everything. Everything. What if this king wants to attack the other three major forces? As long as the fundamentals of the empire remain unchanged, the second consul can decide for himself. What if this king wants to mobilize the Imperial Legion and go to other worlds? As long as it doesn't affect the empire at all. One question, one answer, a temptation, a response. After Suma's trial was over, a smile appeared on the first consul's face without facial features. He threw a black sign to Sumu and said with a chuckle, with the second consul guarding the empire, this king can rest assured. In the future, as long as the empire remains unshakable, this king will basically never appear here again. The affairs of the empire are naturally decided by His Excellency the second consul. In addition, this is a death certificate, a proof of entering the Dark Council. If you have time, the second consul may wish to explore the world of death. With the death certificate in hand, the second consul is a member of the Dark Council, and all monsters in the dead world will not take the initiative to attack the second Your Excellency the consul. At the same time, except for some areas of the death plane, all areas are also open to the second archon. So, after saying this, the first consul stood up and bowed slightly to Sumu. Your Excellency the second consul, the world is very big. This king is looking forward to meeting you in the world of death. Just like last time, the faint blue flames that outlined the human shape quietly collapsed, and all traces of the first consul also disappeared from this world. By this time, not only those imperial consuls were stunned, even Sumu himself was a little stunned. The expected conflict did not arise. When he came and showed his strength a little, the first consul, who was still stronger than himself, did not hesitate to let go of power and handed over the rule of the entire empire to himself. As long as it doesn't change at all, as long as the creatures living in the undead empire continue to believe in the Dark Titan, as long as there is no change in the monthly common prayer, one of the four superpowers of the real continent, the Undead Empire. It was actually given to me by the first consul. Dark Council Death Certificate. The world is large. Holding the small black token left by the first consul, Sumu carefully pondered the words left by the first consul. A high-level sanctuary. It is extremely difficult to develop the dimension plane to at least the medium plane level dimension demon god without tens of thousands of years. In these tens of thousands of years, the world that the first consul has experienced is definitely not rare. Perhaps, the Undead Empire on the Anreal continent is just one of the many undead empires established by the first consul, so he never came in person. So, when he entered the sanctuary and was qualified to guard the Undead Empire in his place, that first official did not hesitate to delegate power and left the world to himself. It seems that this is the greatest possibility after all. All the first archon needs is the power of faith. If he can guarantee that the empire will remain unchanged, the creatures of the empire will dedicate the power of faith to the Dark Titan as always. It seems that he really has no need to stay here. Subsequently, Sumu focused his attention on the black token in his hand. When the perception invades this black token, he can feel that the so-called death certificate is actually a condensed force of death that is extremely pure. The power of death, plane of death. Inexplicably, Sumu thought, this token, could it be a trace of the original power of the plane of death? When Suma's perception invaded the black token turned into a force of death again, entered Suma's body, and stained his soul. But, when Unknown constantly perceives this ray of death power with energy, Sumu can clearly distinguish that this ray of death power has no gain or negative effect on himself. It is simply an identity certificate. It was as if it was the evil spirit aura tainted in the bodies of the Banshee King and the Nightmare Mirror, but the rank was higher than that wisp of the evil spirit aura. In addition, it is worth mentioning that, when Sumu activated the token and absorbed it into the power of death into his body, he felt the change in the death aura. That is to say, if there is enough power of death as an identity certificate, he can activate the death aura and evolve the power of death into his own source power. Dark Council, the power of death, plane of death. There must be a great connection between the three. With the death certificate, Sumu can freely enter and exit the plane of death, but out of caution, he did not rush in. He is not stupid and sweet, and naturally he will not be impatient to go to the plane of death after obtaining an identity certificate. For high-level undead, the greatest value of the plane of death is the pure aura of death and darkness in it, a variety of mineral resources that are enough to forge sacred artifacts and endless undead of various types and ranks. These are all he lacks. At least, Su-mu will not rush to the plane of death until he has completed his plan and has strength enough to match or even surpass the first archon. He has determined, in the plane of death, there are not only a large number of high-level undead, but also sanctuary undead and even terrifying undead at the demigod level. A trace of the power of origin and the breath of the evil god in the plane of death is a proof, the end. Still sitting in the position of the 7th consul, Su-mu asked in a low voice, "What do you know about the Dark Council?" Several consuls, including the Banshee King and the Nightmare Scythe, blended together. Even Rhoda Monroe knew nothing. Only the Dark Priest, who had the closest relationship with the 1st consul, hesitated a little. Fan said, "Your Excellency the 2nd consul, as far as his subordinates know, the Dark Council is a huge organization that includes countless powerhouses and covers many worlds. Its headquarters is the Plane of Death. The criteria for joining the Dark Council, the subordinates do not know. The subordinates only know. Wang Dezhao, the 1st consul, is only a member of the Dark Council, and the Dark Titan is one of the 13 speakers of the Dark Council. The Dark Sacrifice is responsible for the beliefs and sacrifices of the entire Undead Empire. When the 1st consul was still there, he was directly responsible to the 1st consul. When the 1st consul handed over everything in the empire to Su-mu, he was responsible to Su-mu. Unless the root of the empire is touched, it is him. Since then, he will not be able to casually contact the 1st consul. The empire of the undead, 9 archons. Although the 9 consuls are equal, but in fact the 1st consul is the real ruler. The 1st consul leaves, and since then, Su-mu is the real ruler of this huge empire, so even the 5th consul, the Dark Sacrifice, calls himself under. Su-mu nodded slightly when the Dark Priest revealed everything he knew. His decision was right. Even the Anreal continent, one of the high-level worlds, is only one of the areas covered by the Dark Council. Even the existence of the 1st consul is just an ordinary member of the Dark Council. Even the evil god of the Dark Titan is just darkness. One of the 13 speakers of Parliament. As can be imagined, how deep are the waters of the Dark Council and the Plane of Death. Entering rashly joining the Dark Council, but it is very likely that you will become cannon fodder.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.